Today we're going to be looking at making a plant pot design. So I'm just going to go to create a new design. And this is a pot that I've used before for a craft to send home. So instead of having grand full fly jutuli, I'm just going to change this to sample pot design. And I'll call this one sample pot design 2 because I actually already have a 1. So I'm going to make a really basic plot design here. I'm going to start with a box. My plant pot is going to be a basic cube, but not a 20 millimeter by 20 millimeter cube, because there's really nothing you can plant in 20 millimeters by 20 millimeters. I'm going to go for a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter. I'm just going to move this back into the center because it's a little easy. So now I have a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter base, and I am a grand total of 2 centimeters tall, or 20 millimeters. That is not really going to work for a plant pot either. So I'm going to, again, just stick with the cube, and I'm going to make this one 100 centimeter or 100 millimeters as well. I'm having a hard time seeing everything in my picture right now, so I'm going to unselect my item, and I'm going to come back over here, which is just fit design in screen. So here's the start of my plant pot. So far, it's not going to be able to plant very much in it because it's solid. So the first thing I need to do is decide how big I want my walls to be and make a giant hollow inside that cube. I could pick another box and make it a hole instead of a solid, or I can take the box that's already made as a hole instead of a solid. I'm actually just going to duplicate this one. So now I have two, one right beside each other. And again, I'm just going to make it easier for me to see everything at one time. I'm going to switch this kind to a hole because I want to use it to hollow out. Obviously right now it is the exact same size. So if I try to put one on top of the other, I'm going to end up with just a hole. And when you print out a hole, it's nothing. So I want to decide how thick I want the walls of my plant pot to be. I find that 5 millimeters is a pretty good amount because then it still gives you space to indent or engrave letters into it or designs and being strong enough. So if I want it to be 5 millimeters on each side, I need to take off 10 millimeters. So I'm going to go to 90 and 90. And I'm going to just make it a little taller so it's easier for me to work with so it doesn't get lost inside here. It doesn't matter that it's taller than this because it's a hole. So I'm going to try to move this over. And I'd like it to be about even. So I'm going to get a top view going on and just try to make sure that it's about 5 millimeters on each side. If it's not exact, that's okay. The only reason I'm trying to make it like that is so that I've got 2 or 3 millimeters for me to indent words in later. And that looks pretty good. Maybe a little over on this side. Maybe I'll move it one more over. Okay, it looks pretty good. Now, the problem here that I haven't taken into account yet is if I group this together, because I'm like, great, I've done my plant pot, and I group it together, and then I quickly check, oh no, there is a hole all the way through. That is not going to be a useful way to do my plant pot either. So I'm going to ungroup these, and I'm going to make sure that I leave myself a floor on the bottom. So using the height of my shape, I'm going to move it up by about 5 millimeters. I'm going to have it about the same kind of wall as I want all around. Now when I select them and put them together into one shape, when I look in, I can see that I still have a solid bottom. I don't want to keep the entire bottom solid. I do want to have some space for water to go through. So I'm going to choose a cylinder that is already a hole. And again, just for ease of use, I'm going to make it taller for me. In this particular design, it doesn't matter how tall I make it because I'm not trying to have solid stuff on either side of it. This is a 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter hole. I don't think I need it to be quite that big, so I'm going to change it to a 10 millimeter by 10 millimeter, 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, and I'm going to try to move it into the middle. I like to check everything on all sides because it's really hard to tell perspective sometimes how close something is to the middle. And just to make sure that it's all the way through, I will shove it down through the bottom. At every step, it is important to group your stuff together so that when you start manipulating things and moving it around, you're not moving things around and leaving parts of your design behind and getting off-centered. So here's my basic plant pot. It's ready to go. For the ones that we've been doing, we leave a little message on it as well. I was planting tomatoes in this with our class. So we put on it, I love you from my head to my toes. In order to write on this side, the easiest thing to do is to change your work plane, to change your bottom. This is where you're going to work off of now. And then I will grab my text, bring it over, and then type in whatever it is you want. So in my case, get back here, text. Sometimes it's hard to grab just the text. I love you. This is obviously too big, so I'm going to hit Shift while I push it down and change the dimensions. Using Shift means that the ratios will stay the same. If I don't use Shift, then I could end up stretching it out more than I want to. If you make a mistake and don't like your last move, Control Z will undo the last thing you did. There's my I love you. Make sure that it is on top of where I want it. Grab another text. From my head. Again, far too big. So Shift, click. Make it small enough to fit on. Not quite small enough yet. I love you from my head. To my toes. And we planted tomato plants in these. Obviously, you can write any kind of messages that you would like on it or any kind of designs. You could leave it like this. It would print out this far. If you are going to keep it as text that is sticking out, I would suggest moving it in so that there is only 2 or 3 millimeters that remains outside. Otherwise, you should really build a scaffolding underneath it. I myself like the indented text, so I'm going to turn this into a hole and then push it in by 2, 3 millimeters. I'll select those two, group my shapes together, and I always like to make sure that I didn't accidentally, Control Z, this is why we group things together, that I didn't accidentally write all the way through to the other side. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing for the other ones. If I wanted to keep it as a solid as opposed to a hole, I would still push it in just a little bit so that there would be less scaffolding needed. However, I like mine as a hole. Turn it into a hole, push it in 2 or 3, select the next one, turn it into a hole, push it in 2 or 3. Group everything together. Again, at every step, group it together so that you don't accidentally leave your words behind. You can tell that you've done it correctly because it actually looks like a hole now. I'm going to move my work plane down. This is great, but I really want my parents to know that I'm the one who made it. So I'm going to take my bottom view, and I'm actually going to change my work plane to be the bottom. It looks almost the same. However, if I leave it as the regular work plane, my text will be like mirrored. So I'm going to bring text over here, and I'm just going to put down who it's from. Select just the text. So then you would just put down your name here. Size it the way you need it to be sized. This one you would definitely want to be a whole, because if you leave it as sticking out, now you've got an unbalanced bottom. And push it in. There we go. Sometimes you have to move it around so that you can see the part that you want. Again, I'm going to go about 3 in. Group them, Control Z. Group the two together to make sure you're happy with your work before you move on to the next part. Quickly check to make sure that you didn't accidentally go all the way through. And then I would probably also put down the year or the event I was doing it for, just so that they would be a memento that you would remember for all time. Feel free to add any other decorations to it. I know we've had a lot of people who've enjoyed adding stars, hearts, a little other sayings like "I love you to the moon and back," something that means something to their family. And there's your basic plant pot.